The night the woman knocked on the ranch house door, the wind was already telling a hard story. It came down from the hills dry and cold, dragging dust along the porch boards and making the lantern swing like it could not decide whether to stay lit or give up. Inside, the rancher sat at the table with a chipped mug of coffee gone cold, counting numbers that no longer added up. Cattle prices were down, fences needed mending, and the house felt too big since silence had taken up residence. When the knock came, it was soft at first, almost polite, as if the hand feared being turned away. He did not rise right away. In the West, a knock after dark could mean trouble, or worse, a promise that cost more than it gave. The second knock was firmer. A child's cough slipped through the door, thin as a thread. That sound cut through his caution. He stood, joints stiff from a long day, and crossed the room. The door opened to lamplight spilling onto a woman holding a small girl close to her chest. The girl's head rested against her shoulder, hair tangled by travel, eyes too tired to be curious. The woman's coat was worn at the cuffs, boots scuffed, but she stood straight. Her gaze did not wander. It held to his face like she had practiced it on the road. She said she had nowhere else to go. The words came out steady, though the wind tugged at them. She said her daughter needed a home, at least for the night, maybe longer if the Lord allowed it. She said she could work. Cook, clean, sew, keep quiet if that was the rule. The rancher noticed the way she spoke plain, without begging, as if dignity was something she had learned to carry even when it got heavy. He stepped aside to let them in. The warmth of the room met them, and the girl stirred, opening one eye before closing it again. He took in the sight of them as one takes in a sudden change in weather. There was a story there, written in dust and miles, but he did not ask for it yet. In his line of life, questions could wait until morning. Survival did not. He set another log on the fire and poured hot water into a basin. The woman thanked him with a nod. Her voice was low, careful not to wake the child. As she settled the girl onto a bench near the hearth, the rancher felt the house shift. It was the smallest thing, like a chair being moved, but it changed the room all the same. The girl's boots were too big, sawless thin. Her hands were cracked from cold. The woman rubbed them gently, humming a tune the rancher did not know but felt familiar anyway. Outside, the wind kept up its work, but inside there was a fragile quiet, the kind that could break if handled wrong. They shared a simple meal. Bread, beans, a bit of salt pork. The woman ate little. The girl ate enough to sleep again, her breathing evening out as the fire settled. The rancher cleared his throat. He said the house had 2 rooms, one with a bed that had known better days and one with a cot. He said he had lost his wife years back and the place had been empty since. He did not say more. He did not need to. The woman looked at him then, really looked, as if measuring the weight of his words. She said she understood loss. She did not explain how. She asked what he wanted in return. Work, he said, honesty, no trouble brought to his door. She nodded again. The deal felt spoken, though not sealed. Later, when the girl was settled, the woman stood by the table, hands folded. The lantern threw shadows across her face, softening some lines, sharpening others. She said she had walked for days. That men along the road had offered help with conditions that came too close to harm. She said she had learned to choose her chances carefully. The rancher listened, feeling the weight of her trust settle where loneliness had been sitting too long. He told her the truth then, the part that made his voice rough. He said the nights were long. He said the bed was colder than it should be. He said he would not force anything, but he would not lie either. He said if she stayed, there would be comfort under his roof and expectations that were not written down. He said he wanted her not as a thing to be bought, but as a woman who chose to stay. The words surprised him as they left his mouth, plain and risky. The woman did not recoil. She did not step closer either. She breathed, slow and measured. She said she would not trade her body for shelter. She said she had done enough trading in her life. Then she paused, eyes steady, and said she did not deny wanting warmth or touch or the safety that came from being wanted by one man instead of hunted by many. She said if there was to be anything between them, it would be by choice and it would not touch her child. Not ever. He agreed at once. The line was clear to him, as clear as a fence post set straight. The child was to be protected. The house was to be safe. Whatever else might grow would do so in daylight, not in shadows. They stood there with the fire between them, the future hovering like smoke. He showed her to the spare room. The bed creaked when she set her hand on it, testing. She thanked him again, softer this time. He lingered at the door, wanting to say something that would settle the air, but finding no words that fit. Sleep came late. The rancher lay awake, listening to the house breathe. He thought of the way the girl had clutched her mother's coat, of the woman's calm strength, of his own confession hanging in the room like a promise not yet earned. He thought of dawn and what it would ask of them all. Morning arrived pale and sharp. The woman was already up, sweeping the floor, hair tied back. The girl sat at the table, swinging her legs, smiling shyly when he entered. The sight struck him harder than he expected. A home was not just walls and land. It was small motions, shared air, a place where a child could smile without fear. They spent the day working side by side. The woman learned the rhythm of the ranch quickly. She moved with purpose, asking questions, offering ideas. The girl followed, gathering kindling, naming the chickens. By afternoon, the rancher realized the quiet inside him had changed. It was no longer empty. It was waiting. As the sun dipped low, a rider appeared on the far road, kicking up dust. The woman froze, hand tightening around the broom handle. Her face went pale, eyes fixed on the horizon. The rancher followed her gaze, feeling the old warning rise in his chest. Whoever was coming carried the past with him, and the night would not be kind to unfinished business. The rider slowed as he reached the gate, horse blowing hard from the climb. He did not wave. He did not call out. He sat tall in the saddle, hat brim low, watching the house like it owed him something. The rancher felt the land tighten around them, the way it did before a storm broke. He stepped forward, placing himself a little ahead of the woman and the child, a quiet signal that this was his ground. The woman spoke under her breath, not a prayer, more like a warning she had learned to give herself. She told the rancher that trouble had a way of finding her no matter how far she walked. She said the man out there had a look she recognized, a look that measured people like property. She asked if she should take her daughter inside. The rancher nodded once. The girl hesitated, then obeyed, glancing back with wide eyes that carried too much understanding for someone so young. The rider dismounted slow, boots crunching on gravel. Up close, he smelled of sweat and cheap tobacco. His coat was new, his manners were not. He asked who owned the place. The rancher answered plain. The man smiled without warmth and said he was looking for a woman and a child. Said they had run from a debt that needed settling. He said folks like that often lied, but money never did. The rancher kept his voice even. He said travelers came and went. He said debts were not his concern. The rider's eyes slid past him toward the door. He asked again, this time softer, like a man offering a favor. The rancher felt the woman's fear pressing against his back, felt his own resolve harden. He told the rider to leave. The land did not welcome him. The rider laughed once, sharp. He said he would remember the place. He mounted and rode off, dust hanging behind him like a threat left unsaid. When he was gone, the woman's knees buckled. The rancher caught her elbow, steadying her without pulling her close. She thanked him, voice shaking. She said the man worked for someone who collected people as easily as money. She said she had escaped once and would not be taken again. They talked long after dark. She told him pieces of her road, never the whole thing, a husband gone too soon. Promises made by men who spoke smooth and meant harm. A child who learned to be quiet when grown voices rose. The rancher shared his own losses. A wife buried on a hill where the grass grew thin. A ranch that asked more each year and gave less back. They found a strange comfort in trading truths that did not demand pity. Days passed with a careful peace. The woman settled into the work, the child into the rhythms of ranch life. Laughter returned in small, surprising ways. Yet the rider's shadow lingered. Tracks appeared near the fence. A gate left ajar. The rancher slept lighter, rifle closer. He wondered what price the woman truly carried, and whether his promise of shelter would be enough when the bill came due. One evening, as the sun bled into the hills, the woman stood beside him at the fence. She said she knew staying put them all at risk. She said leaving would break her daughter's heart. She asked him what he wanted. The question hung between them, heavy and honest. He said he wanted a home that stayed. He said he wanted them safe. He did not say how much he wanted her, but she heard it anyway. In the distance, a second rider crested the ridge. Then a third. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of hooves. The woman's hand found his sleeve, gripping tight. The rancher felt the old west rise up around them, unforgiving and watchful. Whatever was coming would not be turned aside by hope alone. He squared his shoulders, knowing the night would demand a choice from them both, and that choice would change the shape of the home forever. The riders did not rush the place. They slowed as they reached the lower pasture, spreading out like men who knew patience paid better than haste. The rancher counted 3, then 4 shapes against the dying light. He felt the ground under his boots, solid and familiar, and tried to let that steadiness move into his chest. He told the woman to take her daughter to the root cellar and stay quiet. She hesitated, eyes searching his face for certainty he could not honestly give. He promised to come for them when it was safe. She believed him because she had to. From the porch, the rancher raised a hand, not in greeting, but as a line drawn. The lead rider answered with a nod that carried no respect. Voices drifted across the field, words lost to distance, meaning clear enough. They wanted what they had come for, and they believed time was on their side. The rancher thought of the law, days away by horse, and of neighbors who were good men but lived far apart. This was how the West tested you, by asking what you would protect when help was a rumor. Inside the cellar, the woman pressed her daughter close. The air smelled of earth and stored apples. She whispered a story she remembered from her own childhood, about a brave bird that crossed a desert carrying water under its wings. The girl listened, fingers tight around her mother's sleeve. She had learned not to cry when fear came calling. That knowledge hurt the woman more than anything the riders could do. One of the men dismounted near the corral, running a hand along the fence as if checking its worth. Another circled wide, eyes on the barn. The lead rider called out again, voice smooth, saying they only wanted to talk. He said the woman owed a debt and debts followed blood. The rancher answered that the land was private and so were the people on it. He said there would be no talking tonight. The standoff stretched. Night settled in, stars sharp and cold. The rancher felt the weight of the rifle in his hands and remembered his father teaching him to shoot straight and only when needed. He did not want blood on the ground that fed his cattle. He also did not want fear ruling his house. Somewhere between those wants, a choice waited. From the edge of the pasture, a different voice rose, younger, unsure. That rider said they could come back with papers, with men who wore badges. The lead rider laughed and said papers bent when money leaned on them. The rancher wondered which of them spoke the truth. He wondered how long a promise could hold against a pocket full of coin. The woman listened from below, heart pounding. She thought of the road she had walked, of doors shut and hands that grabbed. She thought of the rancher's plain kindness and the way he had drawn a line without raising his voice. She knew she had brought danger with her. The thought sat heavy, but it did not turn her away from the hope she had felt here. She had not felt hope in a long time. Hours passed in a tense quiet. The riders set a small fire near the fence, a show of comfort meant to unnerve. Smoke drifted toward the house. The rancher stayed on the porch, a shadow among shadows. He imagined dawn and what it might bring. He imagined neighbors riding in if word reached them, imagined the riders growing impatient. He imagined the woman's daughter sleeping in the cellar, trusting adults to keep the dark out. Near midnight, one rider approached the gate again. He spoke low, offering terms. He said they would take the woman only, leave the child. He said the rancher could forget all this by morning. The rancher felt anger flare, quick and hot. He answered that there were no terms. He told the rider to leave while leaving was still possible. The rider's face hardened. He stepped back, murmured to the others. The fire was kicked out, boots grinding embers into dirt. The rancher sensed movement to his left, then to his right. He shifted his stance, heart steadying into a calm he had not known he possessed. This was his land. This was his stand. Down below, the woman felt the change too. She held her daughter tighter, whispering that the brave bird always made it through. She promised that tomorrow they would feed the chickens and watch the sunrise. Promises were fragile things, but they were all she had to give. A shot cracked the night, not aimed at the house but into the air, a warning. The sound echoed off the hills, rolling back like thunder. The rancher did not return fire. He waited, breathing slow, letting the riders decide how far they would go. Silence followed, thick and pressing. At last, hooves shifted, voices argued in low tones. The riders mounted, not retreating so much as pulling back like a tide testing the shore. The lead rider called out that this was not finished. He said the woman's past would catch up with her. He said the rancher would regret choosing trouble over peace. When they finally rode off, the rancher did not relax. He watched the dark until it felt empty again. Then he went to the cellar and opened the door. The woman looked up, relief and fear tangled together. He told her they had gone for now. He did not say for good. She nodded, understanding more than he had said. They sat at the table until dawn, speaking little. The child slept with her head on her mother's lap. Outside, the first light touched the land, softening it. The rancher knew the morning would bring decisions that could not be undone. The woman knew she would have to choose between running again or trusting this place with everything she had left. Neither spoke it aloud, but the choice waited with the sun, patient and unforgiving. Morning did not wash the fear away. It only showed it more clearly. The ranch looked the same as it always had, fences stretched thin across open land, the barn leaning just enough to remind you it had seen hard years. But something had shifted. The woman felt it as she stepped out into the light, the way a person feels eyes on their back even when no one is there. The rancher felt it too, measuring the quiet and finding it full of warnings. They worked anyway. Work was the only thing that kept the mind from circling the same dark thoughts. The woman scrubbed the table, swept the floor, and cooked breakfast with hands that shook just a little. The child stayed close, asking fewer questions than she should have had to learn to silence. The rancher repaired a loose board on the corral, eyes scanning the hills more than the wood beneath his fingers. By noon, a neighbor rode in from the east. A good man, slow to speak, quicker to listen. He had seen tracks near the fence line and heard talk in town about men asking questions. The rancher did not hide the truth. He said trouble had come calling and might come again. The neighbor nodded and said word could be passed. Help would not be fast, but it would come. In the West, that was the best promise a man could make. The woman listened from the doorway, hope and guilt pulling at her in equal measure. She had not asked for protection, yet it had wrapped around her all the same. She wondered what price would be demanded later, not in words but in loss. When the neighbor rode off, she asked the rancher if he regretted letting them stay. He answered without thinking, no. The certainty in his voice surprised them both. As the day wore on, signs appeared like quiet threats. A fence cut clean, a water trough tipped. Small things meant to show reach. The rancher set extra watches on the perimeter, marking spots where the land narrowed and could be held if needed. He moved with purpose, the kind born from knowing exactly what you stood to lose. That evening the woman told him more of her past. Not everything, but enough. She spoke of a man who ran numbers and owned people through ink and fear. She spoke of being promised safety and finding a cage instead. She spoke of the night she took her child and walked until her feet bled. The rancher listened, jaw tight, anger held in check by understanding. He did not ask why she had chosen his door. She said, sometimes you choose the place that feels the least like a lie. The child fell asleep to the sound of adult voices kept low. Outside, clouds gathered, thick and heavy, as if the sky itself was waiting. The rancher checked the rifle again, then again. He did not want to use it. He knew he might have to. He wondered if wanting a quiet life was asking too much of a land built on taking. Near midnight the dogs barked. Not the sharp warning of a stranger at the gate, but the uneasy sound that said something was wrong beyond sight. The rancher stepped onto the porch. The woman followed, wrapping a shawl tight around her shoulders. The air smelled of rain and dust. From the far hill a lantern flickered, then another. Shapes moved where there should have been none. They did not speak. Words felt small against what was coming. The rancher guided the woman back inside, firm but gentle. He told her to keep the child close and be ready. Ready for what, he did not say. He took his place by the door, heart steady, mind clear in a way it had not been in years. The lanterns drew closer, stopping just out of range. A voice called out, different from before, older, calmer. It spoke of agreements and consequences. It spoke of order in a wild land. The rancher answered that order built on fear was no order at all. Silence followed, stretched thin. Rain began to fall, light at first, then harder, turning dust to mud. The lanterns blurred, shadows doubling. The woman prayed quietly, not for safety alone, but for strength. She thought of the life she wanted for her child, simple and rooted. She thought of the rancher standing between them and the dark, and something warm and fierce took hold in her chest. A figure stepped forward, hands visible, voice smooth. He said this did not have to end badly. He said the woman belonged to a contract that did not fade with distance. He said the rancher was a fool to stand in the way of profit. The rancher replied that people were not cattle. He said contracts written in cruelty burned easy. The rain soaked them all. Thunder rolled, close enough to rattle the windows. The stand felt like the edge of a knife. One wrong move would tip it into blood. The rancher felt time slow, each breath counted. He wondered if this was how his father had felt, holding ground against men who believed might made right. Inside, the child woke and asked if the storm would pass. The woman kissed her hair and said yes, because storms always did. Even when they took something with them, they did not stay forever. Outside, boots shifted in the mud. Hands hovered near weapons, the lanterns wavered. Somewhere in the dark, a horse spooked, breaking the tight line of men. Voices rose, sharp and angry. The rancher felt the moment stretch, ready to snap. He tightened his grip, knowing that whatever happened next would decide more than one life. Lightning split the sky, white and blinding, freezing the scene in harsh clarity. For an instant, everyone stood revealed, choices laid bare. Then the thunder crashed down and the night held its breath, waiting to see who would move first. The thunder rolled on, deep and shaking, and when the light faded the world came back slower, like it was choosing what to keep. In that pause, the rancher took one step forward, boots sinking into mud. He did not raise the rifle. He kept it low, steady, the way a man does when he wants to end things without blood. His voice carried through the rain, clear and even. He said this land was not for sale, and neither were the people standing on it. He said any man who crossed the fence again would answer to more than just him. The older voice answered, sharp now that the moment had stretched too far. He said the law favored those who wrote it. He said men like the rancher always learned late. Then a sound cut through the rain that did not belong to the storm. Hooves, many of them moving fast. From the east and the south, lanterns flared, brighter and closer than before. Shouts followed, familiar voices calling names, neighbors, ranch hands. Men who had heard the word passed and chosen to ride despite the weather. The balance shifted. You could feel it, the way fear changes sides. The men in the mud hesitated, turning their heads as more riders appeared, rifles visible, faces set. This was no longer a lonely stand on an open plain. It was a line drawn by a community that had decided enough was enough. The man with the older voice cursed under his breath. He took a step back, then another. He said this was not finished, but his words had lost their weight. The rancher did not answer. He did not need to. The rain soaked through coats and hats, washing dust and bravado into the ground. One by one, the lanterns lowered, horses were turned. The men retreated into the dark, taking their threats with them. When it was over, the quiet that followed felt strange, like a room after a fight where no one quite knows how to sit. The rancher stayed on the porch until the last hoofbeat faded. Then he set the rifle down and let out a breath he had been holding since before dawn. His hands shook, just a little. He did not try to hide it. Inside, the woman opened the door. Her eyes searched his face, found the answer there. She sagged against the frame, relief breaking through fear at last. The child peered around her leg, rain dripping from her hair, and asked if the storm had passed. The rancher knelt so he was level with her and said, yes, it had passed. The truth of it felt good in his mouth. The neighbors stayed until first light, sharing coffee and quiet talk. No one made jokes. They spoke of fences and watches and letters to be written to men who wore badges and still cared what was right. When they finally rode off, the land looked different. Not safer exactly, but steadier, like a place that had remembered what it stood for. Days turned into weeks. No riders returned. Word came from town that the men asking questions had moved on, chasing easier ground. Papers were drawn up by a local judge who owed the rancher a favor from years back. They said no claim could be made on the woman or her child, not now, not ever. The rancher did not celebrate. He fixed a fence and let the good news settle in its own time. The woman found her stride. She took over the kitchen, then the garden, then the books, her careful hand bringing order where there had been drift. The child grew bold, racing the dogs across the yard, laughing in a way that sounded like summer. At night, the house no longer felt empty. It felt lived in. One evening, as the sun slid low and painted the hills gold, the rancher and the woman sat on the porch steps. The day's work was done, the air was calm. He told her he would not ask her to stay out of gratitude or fear. He said she could leave if she wished, with his help and his blessing. The words cost him something, and she knew it. She took a long time before answering. She said she had spent too much of her life running. She said a home was not walls alone, but people who stood when it mattered. She said her daughter had learned what safety looked like here. Then she looked at him, plain and honest, and said she had learned it too. They did not rush what came next. The West had taught them patience. They shared meals and work and quiet evenings. Trust grew in small ways, in the way he listened, in the way she stayed. When he finally reached for her hand, it felt like a promise kept rather than one made. Seasons changed. The ranch weathered a hard winter and a kinder spring. Cattle prices rose a little. The garden thrived. Laughter came easier. The past did not vanish, but it lost its hold. The woman no longer flinched at every rider on the road. The rancher slept through the night more often than not. On a clear morning, with the hills green and the sky wide, they stood together and watched the child chase butterflies near the fence. The rancher said the house could use repairs, maybe an extra room. The woman smiled and said she knew just how to start. They stood there, shoulder to shoulder, not needing more words. The land remained what it had always been, hard and honest. It asked for work and gave back only what was earned. But now it also held a home where a child felt safe, where a woman chose to stay, and where a man learned that standing your ground could lead not just to survival, but to something like grace.